So this is the Hillingdon Audit Committee meeting of the 28th of August. We have just had a Part 2 session, which was in private, so we're going to go into the Part 1 session. Because we had time before we started the Part 2 session, we covered Item 7 and Item 14, which are Part 1, so those won't be actually on the recording that is just about to happen, but the minutes will be available of Item 7 and Item 14, so they will be public and accountable in that way. So I'm going to go straight into Item 8. Claire, you're down to present Item 8.
Thank you. So Item 8 is the draft annual report of the Audit Committee. So this is drafted by myself on behalf of the Audit Committee, but I'd like to stress this is your annual report. This is your opinion of the work that was undertaken during 23-24. It is based on the reports that were presented over the air and the meetings that you had. Please let me know if there's anything you wish to change. Obviously, all of the opinions within the report are just draft. Obviously, as the head of internal audit, I am going to say that the audit committee thinks that internal audit is amazing. If you disagree, please do let me know. This, like I say, is your report, so please change any of the wording. This is just a draft version for discussion and for you to take forward afterwards.
Okay, so obviously John, who's our independent chair, is stepping down. Is he technically still in post at the moment?
I think technically, yes.
Okay. Would it be possible for this to be sent to him and get comments, written comments for us before we finally approve it? Just purely because he's been around obviously for 6 years and over the last year. So I think before we approve it formally as a committee, I think it'd be useful to get his views on it, and those can be just in writing if that's possible, Ryan. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions on this? No. So generally I was satisfied with it, but I think it's important that we get John's input on it because he was around for last year and longer. So thank you. Thank you for all your work. Right. So we go on to Item 9, which is the Internal Audit Progress Report. Claire, that is you again.
Brilliant, thank you. This is the Internal Audit Progress Report as of the date of the papers. So since the last Audit Committee, we have finalised 10 reports. They are summarised on page 6 of the report in the table, which is page 76 of the pack. 2 of them are substantial, 4 of them are reasonable. There was 1 advisory review in relation to the culture, 1 limited and 2 no assurance reports. In relation to the limited assurance report, that was around performance information. Now, this was a known area of improvement, and it is part of the digital strategy and digital programme, looking at our performance indicators, looking at developing a dashboard for CMT level. So this review was actually aimed at looking at service levels, looking at within services what key performance indicators do they have already, and actually how do they review them, how do they monitor those. So we picked a small sample of services across the directorates. Overall, all of the services reviewed did have KPIs in place, which is good. However, the KPIs were not aligned to the objectives of the service, of the directorate, all the way up to the sort of council strategic objectives, which is what we'd be looking for. And also they weren't formally reviewed or monitored in kind of consistent, systematic way that we'd expect with a kind of governance framework. We'd expect KPIs to be aligned to what it is that we want to achieve, and filter all the way up, right the way to CMT. And similarly, the objectives of CMT and the council filter all the way down to service level through those performance indicators. Any questions on that report before I move on to the no assurance report?
I have a couple of questions. My first question is, in the report on page 74, you talk about how your work has changed in some areas because new managers came in requesting, obviously, new internal audits, which meant you had to reprioritise your workload. So my question is then, how is that done? How is that done in a way that makes sure that we do still do the reports into the things that need doing reports into?
Good question. So normally, if people are adding stuff to the plan, then if we have the capacity to do it, we will do it because that's positive that people are engaging with us and we are providing support. If it is to take anything out, we tend to give quite a bit of challenge, I'll be honest, around that. It's normally because they're doing getting assurance from a different perspective. So if it's a transformation project or there's a little sort of internal action plan already in place, then we would look at how can we get assurance after that, if that's more beneficial. It's pointless us looking at the same thing that's being looked at in a different way. So yeah, we kind of push back if it's just, we're too busy, we can't look at it. We tend to delay things. It's pointless us booking in to do an audit if we're not going to get any of the information. So we do have to be a little flexible with timings. So for instance, Director of Governance, we did move that back slightly because there was the zero-based budget challenge sessions, which a lot of people were involved in. So we did have to be flexible. If people are pushing things back too much, then we would put our foot down and escalate it. So if I had any concerns, then we'll go through to CMT, to the Audit Committee, with this is, not acceptable. But yeah, it's more working sort of to make sure that we can get the information, because if we can't get the information, we would just end up giving a no assurance report anyway. And in some situations, if we can't, that is what we have to do.
Through you, Chairman. You touched on zero budgeting. Once that process is done in that particular area where you're looking at, so they've done that, does that actually feed a better outcome? Because are we working still in silos? Can we then break down those silos so they're all working together? I'm sorry, maybe I'm a bit vague.
No. So in terms of zero-based budgeting, there's still a lot of outcomes to come from that, which it is on my risk register for my internal audit service in terms of what is the outcomes that come from that and how does that influence our internal audit plan. Because if there is big changes, then yes, that's absolutely something we want to look at. So yeah, it's kept under review as things change.
Thank you.
June?
Claire, just want to ask a question on SEND. I know the report came out, but it has here on SEND, the data quality final report that was issued in July. The assurance level was no, but then it's high at 4. Can you give me an explanation on that? And also the other one is on the uninspected B&Bs, yeah? And that was issued on the 2nd of August. That's a 2. So can you give me some explanation? I know it's got a medium turn here, but 2 it's got a high turn.
Yeah. So if I move on to talking about those no assurance reports, so SEND data quality was added to the plan because there was concerns around significant overspends against the agreed targets with the Council's dedicated schools grant safety valve. It had already been highlighted that there was issues with the original data that was used. So we were doing this review in December of 2023 when work was still ongoing, looking at that data. So looking at how the information from the SEND service and the finance service kind of was reconciled and collated to make sure that we had one accurate picture of what the sort of financial impact is. Now, at the point in time that we looked at this in December, the original plan was we would have final figures, but work was still ongoing, which is why we gave no assurance at the time at that point in time. We actually continued working with both finance and the SEND team throughout quarter 4 to make sure that we could continuously engage in that and look at the actions that we're taking, which meant that we could provide ongoing support. That meant that it took a longer time to finalise the report, but it gave us a bit of extra kind of reassurance that actions were ongoing. However, because we do our reviews at a point in time, so this review was done in December, the draft report went out in January, that's why it's no assurance at that point in time. Based on the additional work that we've done, I do know that new processes have been implemented and they did reconcile and agree a sort of position as at the year end, but that isn't reflected within our report because that was based on the work that was ongoing in December. In relation to uninspected B&Bs, So we use a lot of B&Bs to house residents in temporary accommodation. We reviewed a sample of the checks that are undertaken on B&Bs and landlords before we place residents within those properties, and looking at whether those checks were sufficient to give us assurance that the properties met the required standards. Unfortunately, there was insufficient evidence retained to evidence the checks had been completed. So there's things like missing safety certificates, missing contracts, and missing sort of risk assessments. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that those checks weren't done. It's just based on the evidence that was available, which is why, again, we had to give no assurance because we didn't have assurance that those checks had been completed. Yeah, so they are taking a lot of work in relation to...
So that will be an ongoing thing, just to make sure that the checks are in place before you give the all clear.
Yeah, so when we do our follow-up, any sort of high and medium recommendations, we follow up to make sure that they are actually implemented. And they're taking that quite seriously within the service and have quite a detailed action plan around addressing that.
Great, thank you. Philip.
Thank you. Claire, as a new member of the committee, just to give me a little bit of context looking at this properly for the first time, clearly there are a number of audits to be conducted as part of the plan. Just as a bit of historical context, where are we in relation to where we might have been in the past? Are we broadly where we would expect to be? Would we expect this number that are still to be programmed, or what should we take away from this, I suppose, broadly speaking, is what I'm trying to understand. Thank you. Yeah,
so we develop a plan for the full year, which is why there's quite a lot still left to do because this is only in Q1. We are probably where I'd expect to be, getting around 10 to 12 audit reports out for each committee meeting. It tends to get busy at year end because everybody that's pushed stuff back suddenly have to frantically do it because I won't let them get away with it. So it has to happen. But we try, which is why we try to bring more stuff forward into quarters 2 and 3 tend to be where most of our audits are put to. It's roughly where I'd expect to be in terms of our output. In terms of the ratings, so we don't normally have as many limited and no assurance reports. However, I think that's just because we focused a lot more on risk areas, and I think a lot of the work we've done on our risk register and increasing the risk awareness and the risk management culture across the organisation is making people kind of think about risks a lot more and raise them a lot more, which means we can identify them for our audit work to make sure we can focus on them. So I think that's why we're getting a lot more limited and no assurance that we wouldn't normally get. It's not necessarily a bad thing as long as we take appropriate actions to fix those by the year end. I'd be concerned if we have so many no assurance reports and also so many outstanding recommendations from those reports at the year end, because if people have been told now and then do nothing about it, that's a bigger concern rather than not being told about it.
Quick supplementary, if I may. So thank you for that, Claire. So the way in which these audits are prioritised is informed to some extent by the risk register and rating within. Is that right?
100%. So internal audit, our role is to provide assurance to you guys that that there are controls in place to mitigate against your risks. So yeah, our work plan very much adding value by looking at your biggest risk areas. It's pointless looking at areas that you know are good or that you get other assurance over. You know, you're always hitting your performance indicators, you're always under budget, whatever it is. So we do look at the risk areas, and that is, but it's not just looking at risk areas because there are unknown areas of risk. So we do look at if there's stuff externally, so in other councils that are coming out, we could consider doing a review here. Or if there's things, you know, might not necessarily be on the risk register, but things you pick up like KPIs being missed or areas that are going over budget or whatever it is, all kind of complaints coming through in a certain area, then we tend to look at those areas as well. So it kind of isn't just taking the risk register and taking the top 10 risks off there as that's your audit plan. It takes in a lot of different elements.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Claire. So, you're also...
Can I just say one
yes,
thing?
of course.
Yeah,
Yes,
so just at the back of the progress report, we have included a paper on the new internal audit standards that are coming in. For time, I'm not going to say much on this. It's purely for information. They're new standards, global standards coming in. It creates a lot more oversight for the audit committee, so you do have a lot more responsibility for basically oversight of myself and my team in terms of things like the recruitment, where I sit within the organisation. A lot of that will need to work through how it fits within wider council policies, but it's just to kind of give you an early heads up. We are expecting more guidance to come out about this in terms of the public sector specific focus, but it's for information.
So my question on that is, when are you able to give us a full explanation of how this applies to Hillingdon and how this affects our role in terms of what we do here as an audit committee?
Yeah, so hopefully in the paper it lists out word for word what the standard says in relation to your essential conditions, which are things that you as a committee are required to do. When we're expecting more public sector guidance, hopefully in September, October time, so hopefully by November we'll be able to give more information on the public sector specific guidance and what the rules and regulations are. I don't think there's anything that we cannot action by January anyway. A lot of it is fairly standard stuff that we already do. It would only be if you had to recruit for a new head of internal audit, we'd have to follow new standards. Now hopefully you're not going to need to do that. So yeah, it's more of a longer term solution in terms of looking at meeting with HR and agreeing how we would implement that in the future.
We all happy to move on to the next slide? Fantastic. Okay, thank you. So now we go on to item 10, which is the risk management report, and that's also presented by you, Claire.
Great, thank you. So quarter one risk management report. So we are now using the new risk management system. It's been rolled out across the different directorates, and overall positive feedback from everybody. I think it's described as being easy to use, which is exactly what you want in a system. In total, we have 221 risks on the system as at the end of June, and I can report there's 230 as at today. 16 of those are red rated, so that is our biggest scoring risks. And they form the corporate risk register, which is on page 7 of the report and 101 of the full pack. We also have new key performance indicators, which are presented to the corporate risk management group on the 24th of June. So they're the group that are responsible for basically implementing the risk register and managing it and making sure that risks are being monitored. One thing to note is the counter-fraud team moved their counter-fraud risks onto the new system as at the quarter end. This led to a big significant increase in the number of fraud risks on there. So before you all panic that we have the highest number of fraud risks ever, they're not new risks. They've just moved onto the new system, and they've allocated those out to different services. And they deliberately put them on there without a risk score, because that encourages those services to just not take what the counter-fraud team say for granted, and actually consider what controls they have in place to mitigate against those risks, and then close them down if necessary. So we do expect that number to come down quite dramatically. Like I say, overall positive feedback on the new system. Obviously this is a sort of new report in terms of the KPIs. There is so much information I can get from the system. So really my question is, what would you find useful to fulfill your role of getting assurance that risks are being managed and that people are doing their duty and managing risks across the organisation? So what would you find useful? If there is anything, let me know. I can put it in the report for next time.
Okay, but thank you for that. So I had a question which might be sort of related to your question in a funny way. So on page 98, you talk about the 12 risks in paragraph 29, the 12 risks overdue for review on the system, 2 of which are red risks, and obviously that goes ping. Well, they're overdue and 2 of them are red. That sounds serious to me. And then in paragraph 210, it says all risks overdue for review are highlighted through the corporate risk management group and the corporate management team. Okay, fantastic. But what does that really mean? What do you do about it? Because highlighting is highlighting, but is anything really done about these sort of overdue risks?
So it's the corporate risk management groups and CMT's responsibility to manage risks. So it's highlighted through to them to take it forward. You shouldn't see those risks next time. If you're seeing the same risks as not being reviewed, then I would be questioning. I'd be hauling Tony up in front of you with why are you not managing these risks? This is what you're supposed to be doing. So for that, anything that you'll see consistently on there. On the red rated risks, we do have the last date of review in the table in Appendix A. I would say for red rated risks, you want everything to be reviewed probably monthly, because if these are things that are quite catastrophic to the council and quite likely to happen, so viewing them once a quarter is not good enough. You should be looking at them, weekly, daily, definitely monthly. So if you're looking down there and seeing any that are quite out of date and haven't been reviewed recently, those are the ones you'd be wanting to flag up. And again, invite officers along to the audit committee and hold them accountable if they're not doing that. But that is what CMT should be doing. They should be looking at this, questioning this, challenging it. And the same with the corporate risk management group. They challenge and hold each other accountable.
Because obviously that's one of the important things that we should be told as an audit committee, essentially, if those processes aren't being followed, certainly. And my second question is based around sort of action to do with risk, or if there is an inability of action, for example. So for example, if you go look at the table, the summary of corporate risks at June 2024, you have number 5, which is the ability to deliver a balanced budget in the short and medium term as being very high and very large, like the most serious possible risk we have, I suppose. For those most serious risks, the ones in the top corner, I suppose from my perspective, I want to know what are we doing, and also even if that includes, well, we're doing as much as we can, but we can't take it out of that. Obviously, if you controlled all the circumstances, you would do stuff, wouldn't you, to take it out of those quarters? But some of them, I don't know, decent homes, number 6, decent homes, thermal efficiencies, it might remain in that quarter for certain reasons. So I suppose as a committee, what I would find useful is for those really big risks that are likely to happen, what are we doing? And if they're still remaining, why are they still remaining in those areas? Martin. Martin, I think that sounds like a very good suggestion. Before I move on, committee, are we happy to do that as an action in terms of going forward to do the risk? Are we happy? Yeah, good. Can you note that as an action, and we'll discuss that outside this meeting how we can highlight what needs to get. Is it on this particular question? Because Henry had his hand up first. June, sorry. Henry had his hand up first. I'm going to go to Henry, then I'll go to yourself. Henry.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you, Claire, I like what you're doing here. I think it's the right thing to do, and I do realise that red is bad, but it's not always as bad as it is meant to be. So, but you mentioned to the report. So obviously we only meet quarterly. So with all due respect, my memory might be good, but it's not that good to remember that this was red and it wasn't. So is there any way of putting something in here as another table, say, well, this is what it was when we last met, and this is what it is now? So that way that when we come back to it, it refreshes our memory, because we look at the charts. Oh yeah, but it was there. That's right. And you're going in the right direction. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the corporate ones, I have done that. So I've got Q4 and Q1 in terms of what we could fit. For the rest of the risk, it would be way too many to put all 221 that we've got. But yeah, for the corporate risk, so we've got Q4 and Q1. I was proposing just to keep Q1 and then do Q2 next time, rather than having too many columns. But yeah, no, and I can also colour code them as well if that's easier, rather than just giving the ratings to show that changes. In relation to the earlier point as well around the actions, the plan and how they should work is the things that are read on the corporate risk register as being our biggest risk should also align to what our strategic risks are. And that does have a lot more detail in terms of the actions that we're taking. Now, that strategic kind of risk register is still in infancy, and it's been reviewed, and we have aligned it with the new dashboard. So the new CMT dashboard they've got new KPIs. We've aligned it to that, and we've also added them all onto the new risk system. But ideally, you'd expect to see anything that is on your corporate risk register to also align with the kind of bigger strategic risk, because really, if it's big enough to affect the whole council, it's probably going to fit whether or not you achieve your objectives. But we kind of group them, I guess, into a more simplified version within the strategic risk register. But it should hopefully give you those actions going forward.
So that is something that we'll get a report on in the future then?
So it's in the pack. So the strategic risk report is just sort of next few pages. So that's a high level.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you. June.
Clear. So, Claire, on page 101, you have listed the review and the risk with the review dates and the rating. On page 102, you've got close, replace, close, replace, close, replace. And I'm looking at meeting housing needs, yeah? Children's care placement, that's an A. Meeting housing need is an A. Children workforce sufficiency, that's a 2. Children care placement, that's a 2. And high needs SEND placement, it's a 1, a D, that's D1, so that's not too bad. Why is it closed, and what's the reason for that? And then what is it replaced with?
Yeah, so basically when we put stuff onto the new risk management system, a lot of the risks that were previously on our risk register were basically reviewed. So meeting housing needs was quite a kind of high catch-all risk. So it kind of said we're not meeting housing needs across all residents, across the whole council kind of thing, which is always going to be huge. That's guaranteed. We're not going to meet all housing needs, which is why it was A1. So what they did was they've actually split it down into others. So they split it between sort of decent homes, the high levels of homelessness demand. That's a new one being added in. The housing landlord service, not meeting regulatory requirements, is a new one coming in. So those kind of new ones replaced the old ones that you've mentioned. So children's care placements was replaced with increasing costs of external residential provision, and the high needs SEND placements were replaced with uncertainty of the safety valve agreement, and I want to say one of the other ones as well. But that's kind of their review process that they went through, and just as part of updating the new system, really, they took it seriously.
It's just that I didn't understand what it is, because something being closed and then it's added here as a new as a new item going together or merging it together. I think, is there a little explanation note can be put in regards to that so that whoever is looking at it can understand the reason behind why that's closed and where it's merging to and the development of that? Because I wasn't clear until you just pointed it out. And anyone else reading it surely will not be clear if they don't know what it is that is being done.
Yeah, that's
so that would
good.
be, if you got an explanatory note to that, so that if anyone wants to ask a question, then at least they got some guidance on how to ask the question from and where. And that's what confuses me here.
Yeah, hopefully there won't be as many, because it was just moving to the new system that they took the opportunity to really close a lot of the old ones down. But yeah, absolutely, going forward we can do that.
Thank you. Philip.
Thank you, Claire. Returning to page 99, point 2.12. Now, you might well have covered this, and my apologies if you have. But again, there's a sentence there that starts with, "It's expected officers are taking action to reduce risks in practice." What I'm taking from that is you're not able to say that those requisite actions are actually happening, but you are saying that there are rigorous processes within CMD to make sure there's follow-up to ensure they do happen. Is that, am I understanding you correctly there?
So on the new system, every risk that's put on there is things that are proactively being managed. They're not putting the actions on the system. They're putting the risk on. They haven't recorded the actions on there. It's a new system. People are getting used to it. The focus is very much on let's get the risks on there. The next kind of stage is let's tidy them up. Let's put all the kind of stuff around the outside in terms of actions and holding them accountable. So they're probably taking action. I don't think anybody puts a risk on there and thinks, oh, that's my job done, I can just ignore it. They're just not recording them on the system in the way that I expect actions to be recorded. That is something that through Corporate Risk Management Group we will challenge people if they are putting things on and not taking action, because you shouldn't have risks on the system and do nothing about them. If that's the case, then you're tolerating the risk at that level.
Tony.
Actually, Chair, my question was exactly the same as Councillor Nelson's, so thank you, it's been answered.
I have actually another question. Apologies to everyone because this meeting's already gone for so long, but Philip's question stuck something in mind. How do things get taken off? So, for example, worst case scenario, which I'm sure doesn't happen here, I put a risk register on, 3 months later you call me and say, why is nothing happening about this? And I'm like, I don't need this hassle in my life, I'll just take it off. I would never do that, and I'm sure no one here would ever do that. But in terms of like changing the risk or taking it off or lessening it, do we have an accountability process to make sure that such extreme situations would never happen?
Yeah, so through the Corporate Risk Management Group, I have KPIs on closed risks and what they relate to. So we could see if anybody was closing a red-rated risk, and we could challenge it with why are you closing it. Now, they may close red-rated risks if there is literally nothing else they can do and we just have to live with it. It's just a fact. But I'd expect that challenge to go through, say, CMT. They see all red-rated risks. So I would hope that they're challenging that, they're questioning that, and if anything disappears between reviews, they are asking where has it gone. But yeah, it gets reported through Corporate Risk Management Group.
Thank you. The process of that is important. Right. Are we all good? Are we happy to move on to the next agenda item? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Claire. And yes, it's you again, isn't it? Yeah, item 11, strategic risk report.
So this is a strategic risk report that I briefly mentioned. So this summarises our strategic risks against our strategic objectives, because ultimately we want assurance that we are going to meet those objectives. Like I say, a lot of this aligns to what is in the operational risk register. It is just collating it into a more public-friendly, simplified version and bringing together some of those actions where they are bigger, strategic kind of projects and things like that. It has been updated to include the key performance indicators from the new dashboard, and also to include the risk ratings from the new risk management system. There are things missing in there. We'll continue to work on that to make sure it's completed. It's CMT, they own this, they each own each of the risks. They should be discussing them with the relevant cabinet lead for each of these risks. Obviously, with Richard joining, I need to change all the ones for Andy. I'm aware of that. I'm going to have a meeting with Richard to do that before you all tell him off for not updating all this stuff. Give him a chance. So it's purely, this is your kind of assurance that we are, taking the risk against strategic objectives seriously.
Hopefully Richard won't read the risks and think, I'm leaving now. This is what I'm taking on. Hopefully that won't happen. I'm sure it won't. Okay, I don't have any particular questions on this item. Does anybody else? No, I think we covered most. Oh, June, sorry. June, go for it. And mic on.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity and my understanding as well, because these are new to us. It's not something that I've seen before, so it's new to us, and getting to grip with what you're doing, very good job in what you're doing, but making it much more simplistic for us to understand. But just some clarification on page 188, I think, on the strategic risk management register, the second page, and it's just an explanatory note for me, because it got B1 and C2. It had a B1, it's now a C2 in regards to the rating and the link operational risk. Now that's the cabinet member, and I suppose it's the lead for housing in regards to that. And just some explanation on, is that to do with the legal disrepair? Is it to do with damp and mold? Is it to do with decent homes and thermal efficiency? What is that all about? Just a quick explanation for me to understand.
Yeah, so the big high-level risk for this is the high levels of homelessness and housing needs demand. So that's a kind of big overarching risk against our strategic objective, which is Hillingdon as a safe place with resilient, strong communities, access to good quality, affordable housing. So the linked operational risks are the ones from our risk management system. So these are things that basically impact on us achieving this objective, and they impact on us, they impact on this risk score as well. So those are the operational ones that we have on the corporate risk register and also on the system, whereas this high level one, more overarching kind of summary, brings all of those things together, and also other things that we may not have on the operational risk register.
Clarity again. So that means that the increased number that we see here from month to month, that comes under the same status as well. Yeah,
so it's all based on the same risk scoring methodology. It's potentially risk scored by different people. It's not a kind of clear, you get 2 Bs and a C, that means you're going to be a B overall. It's people's looking at the risk overall and saying, how do we risk score this collectively together? You're more likely to see higher risk scores on the more strategic stuff because you're bringing so many different issues. So one example that we used to have on here was around counter-fraud. We used to have a fraud risk at a strategic level. Now, fraud against the council is guaranteed to happen. This is why we have a counter-fraud team. So that would be scored really high in terms of the likelihood. The impact could be anything from, somebody fiddling their expenses by £10 to a massive, multi-million pound kind of procurement fraud or something. If you're looking at scoring that, you'd say, well, A1, because it's guaranteed to happen and it could be potentially catastrophic multi-million pound procurement fraud. So we would have it on there as an A1. Now, if you actually look at the fraud risks and the fraud risk register separately and break it down, which is what the counter-fraud team have done now, you would see actually the ones that multi-million pound procurement frauds are very unlikely to happen. We have good controls to prevent that from happening. The expenses, somebody fiddling get £10, is more likely to happen, but it's not going to have the same impact. It's £10. So the things that are more likely to happen have lower value. Things that are unlikely to happen have a bigger value. So actually, if you look at each kind of separate section, it's a lot lower risk score. Each one of them might be A4 or sort of F1, but they're all kind of much lower levels. So actually, once you break down risks at the operational level, it might not be as high a risk score. So I wouldn't take what's on the corporate risk register rating, so the C3, C3 and B1, I wouldn't take that as being, oh, that means it must be C2 overall. They're different risk scores.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, June. And no more questions? No? Fantastic. Thank you, Claire. And now we pass over to Mark. So, thank you, Mark. Item 12.
Thank you, Chair. I'm conscious of being the end of a very long agenda, so I intend to just draw out a few of the key points from this report and then hand over for your questions, if that suits. 23-24, which is the annual report before you, was an extremely successful one for the team. The headline there is the overall savings figure which we achieved, which was £11.2 million, which we're very proud of. Recognition from that came in part from the team winning the Public Finance Awards in both the Outstanding Fraud Prevention, Detection and Recovery category and the overall Grand Prix. To put some meat on those bones in terms of recognition, obviously lovely to receive from the body, but it has led to much greater recognition of the team nationally as a result of that, and we have been approached by other councils and other fraud teams for learning points and to share best practice, which is really quite gratifying for us. The housing work across the year was 103 property recoveries, which was both a 23% increase on the previous year and a record year for the team. Speaking from my career, I think 103 is outstanding. I've not really seen very much like it in those sorts of numbers before, which is really, really good. Additional billing in revenues of around £4 million through the revenues maximisation, which obviously has a direct impact on council finances with revenue retention schemes. And my final point for this report is in terms of social care savings. You'll see in the report savings of just over £300,000 in social care for the year. What I take from that is it's demonstrating actually an improving work stream. Our work with social care is improving, the relationships are improving, and we've got a great deal of engagement planned across this year to hopefully push that even further. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, and obviously can you pass our congratulations back to the team for your achievements this year. Always good to get these reports, because I mean ultimately the better we are at this, the better it is for Hillingdon residents in terms of claiming back properties, money, and if people believe that they'll be caught, they're less likely to try as well. Doesn't mean they'll never try, of course. So no, it's a very good reading, and the National Award was excellent. My only question actually is around the fraud awareness campaign on page 127, 3.9, paragraph 3.9. It sounds like a really good idea to embed sort of counter-fraud thinking across the organisation. I mean, do we have any sort of evidence yet of that bearing fruit, or is it too early?
No empirical evidence, I would say. It's an ongoing process, so as soon as staff join the council, they have mandatory e-learning in terms of counter-fraud. But that can obviously be a long-standing arrangement working for the council, so it needs to get topped up. And not everyone, having seen a fraud awareness presentation, is then going to experience fraud immediately, so it can be kind of difficult to gauge the knock-on effect. But certainly in terms of the relationship improvements that it builds, because it's getting out there, it's meeting the service areas, they know you're there, and get them thinking about it, I think anecdotally, and from kind of speaking to people, I think that is certainly bearing fruit immediately.
Because obviously there's always new ideas about how to detect fraud, aren't there? So, yeah, no, good. Henry? Sorry.
You sure?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Brilliant. Claire was talking about F1, and then you come in with the Grand Prix award. I didn't know whether it was for Monaco or the British Grand Prix, but anyway, well done. My area is around, obviously, I'm involved with planning, so I'm going to ask that sort of question. The inspection of business and domestic properties in the borough, and also it relates into HMOs. We have a lot of complaints with residents that that when an officer comes to inspect it to find out everything's hunky-dory because they know you come in and they've cleared out things. Are we changing our method of how to get that information?
So I can only answer for the counter fraud team here.
Okay.
Because the HMOs is an issue which cuts across multiple service areas.
Exactly, yeah.
So when we are looking at unregistered dwellings, so the beds in sheds, our visits are all unannounced. Our inspectors are out and about and people don't know we're coming. HMOs, due to changes in the way the government has listed them in terms of council tax, doesn't quite fall in our remit now, and HMO enforcement comes under private sector housing.
Okay.
And I'm not able to answer to their processes. Right.
Can I follow on to that then? There's a prime example for you to use how your experience and what you're doing to a different department in the council, because putting aside HMOs, businesses, a lot of businesses now that are run from home, I do myself, but I'm just a single person, but I've noticed that again, from residents in the borough, they're saying that people are working from home and there's lots of cars parking outside the properties. So then it's a little bit different. Is there a mechanism that we have to say, well, one person working home, because most of us do that now, hybrid working, and then running a company from a home address, a residential address, is that something that you look at?
Not on our team. I think it would fall under planning more so than us in terms of use of the property. There may be implications with business rates, but it's quite nuanced in terms of specific areas set aside just for the business and those kinds of things.
Thank you.
Martin, you wanted to say something?
Certainly. It's an area with difficulties because of the transfer of powers in terms of benefits over to the DWP in 2015, and that interplay can make it difficult. But certainly the team are actively working on matches at the moment around council tax and council tax relief, and are targeted for higher than those figures are, so there should be improvements across the next year, certainly.
Thank you. Jude?
Yeah, I want to go back to the HMO because you said it's not connected on to your work plan, but it's the private sector side of things. Why isn't there not a report on the private sector with HMOs? Because HMOs is a big issue, and there's lots of I'm supposing you're going to find out what is happening with HMOs, because HMOs now is not just a house. It's a big issue that we have in the borough that needs to be dealt with. So why isn't a report or something in here to say this is what the private sector has come under? Because it being separate, we're not getting a report back on exactly what is happening and what the council has under control and is not in control of.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. To be clear, it's dealt with by the private sector housing team as part of Hillingdon, who I believe come under the Place Directorate. I would have to defer to Ryan possibly to say where they would report to in terms of members. They're not part of our team or our directorate, so I wouldn't be able to say where their reports go, I'm afraid.
There would be the relevant scrutiny committee for them. But yes, I think where June might have been going at originally was where I went in my head, and then it said I went no, but it's actually it's a private sector housing team. So Hillingdon Council does deal with the fraud element of that. So it's not the private. We're not relying on the private sector to deal with the fraud element of that. No. Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. May I say this is a discussion for another committee, another place, another time? I completely agree with you, but looking at the time...
Can I make a plea then for
Go on, June.
Finance?
As you are pleading.
Our Cabinet Member for Finance in your discussion. Can you please take this on board and have a discussion around it? Because HMO is the blight within our community at the moment. I agree. Yeah, and something needs to be done in regards to how you're addressing it, because a lot of HMOs are getting away with murder and unaccountable to anything. So can I please plead with you to take that under control or discuss at your next Cabinet meeting, please?
Just very quickly, June, as well though, I think this also would come under the whatever the Resident Services Scrutiny Committee is. So whoever the Labour lead is on within your Labour group, have a word with them in terms of bringing up within them, because that's also where the accountability line goes.
Yeah, but I'm a bit disappointed that it's not.
Counter fraud can't do everything, unfortunately. Yeah. Sorry, Henry, was it a quick related point?
Yes, quickly related point. This is a type of, from the discussion, it's typically where you said how you can implement what you're doing in other parts. If planning is probably one of the good areas for you. If you can help out there, it'd be brilliant. Yep, thank you.
Right, Tony.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. Well done. And a couple of questions really. Your staffing levels over the year, I'm not sure if you can answer or not, but I know you had staff seconded out at various times to help in other areas. Are you back to being fully staffed up now? And
we're at full complement. We've actually had staff seconded in over the last 6 months or so to take up part of the B&B project, so we are at complement. Yeah.
Excellent, good news. And just on the blue badge fraud, because it's quite close to my heart, this one. And well done. And I noticed you're going to take part in the blue badge day of action. I was looking at last year's figures, and it was quite consistent through all the quarters. But the fourth quarter, it dropped off to 0. The money back. It's quite consistent, but it got down to 0. Was there any particular reason why, or did you just didn't catch anybody? Page 130, sorry. In the Appendix A, the loss prevention performance.
Yeah, so that will just be the flow of cases through the system. So the blue badge days which we do, where we go out and find the misuse, are quite resource intensive. And then once that's been done, we're at the mercy of the criminal justice system to a certain extent to how quickly the cases can progress. So I think we'll see in Q1 of this year more results have started to come through again. So it's not a full stop, it's just a comma.
Okay, and it's good that you got some good publicity last year over a prosecution of someone that... good. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tony. And June, Councillor Farley is the opposition lead on the resident service, so have a word with him. Yeah, definitely about the other point. Philip, I think this is the last question.
No, it's been a blue badge has been covered. Thank you, to my satisfaction.
Okay, brilliant.
No worries. Thank you.
Oh, that's fantastic. Right, okay, so we've finished that item, and we're on to our final item of the night because we did the work plan earlier. Mark, this is you again.
Thank you, Chair. And with similar brevity to the last report, a few key points for you. The financial savings for Q1 so far is 3.3 million, so another really good quarter, off to another start for another great year. Equally impressive, the properties recovered on tenancy fraud is 30 for Q1. So following the record team results last year, it's another record for Q1 for a single quarter in terms of properties recovered. So a great trajectory. I've also mentioned already the whimsies of the criminal justice system. There's another 34 cases sitting behind that at various stages of the process on their way through the system. So a steady flow of work coming through. In terms of the revenue size, it's 783,000 in additional billing already in Q1, and 23 unregistered dwellings already identified in Q1. So I think it's fair to say we're really proud of the team and the work they're pushing through. You heard from Claire earlier about our risks going onto the corporate risk register, which I think is noteworthy for our work in Q1. So, as Claire mentioned, all of the fraud risks have gone onto there. The reason I think this is important is how that's going to align us with internal audit, allow much closer working and management of risks jointly between internal audit and counter fraud. And we're planning to support that and the changes, as you heard about, a lot of them being unschooled, with risk workshops with the service areas going forwards for the rest of the year. So hopefully that will reduce some of the numbers on the register, but also improve the service area's knowledge of fraud risk and how it's addressed, and our relationships with them as well. I think it's an important piece of work to note. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and it's good to see that the good work from the yearly report is continuing in this quarter, so thank you. So, does anybody have any questions? No? We're all happy, okay. Well, I'm going to bring the meeting to the close because we did the work plan, didn't we? So, thank you very much, everyone, for attending.